Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Big apologies that there's been a big gap between this and my last video, but I've been trying to complete my collection and let's have a look at it. This is my Great Britain collection from 1840 right through to 1970. It's not complete by any means. It's still very much a work in progress, and you'll see what I mean when we have a look. So the very first page starts in the reign of Queen Victoria, and with the penny black there and the two penny blue. In between those, there's some missing stamps. They're colour variations of those two. And moving on, there's the imperforate penny red stamps. These were issued a year later in 1841 to stop people trying to reuse the stamps over again. There's a few colour variations of those, and some of them look very, very similar. So I'm just taking the word off sellers on eBay for the moment. But like this one here, is not in very good condition. But this is supposed to be orange brown. I know you can't always tell from videos what the colours are, but I have trouble distinguishing some of the colours from each other. But it's all part of collecting, I suppose. You have to get it wrong as well. And moving down, there's two penny blues, again imperforate, but they have white lines just above the 2 pence, whereas the first twopenny blue, it didn't have those lines. And next, these are the perforated penny reds and penny blues. I haven't got any of those yet. These were printed on the same kind of glued paper as the penny reds, the original penny reds. Sometimes you can see the outline of Queen Victoria's head, but I can't see it there. It's some kind of chemical reaction with the red paint. It comes into contact with water and an iron, and gives off a blue coloration. And the first imperforates, they also use this kind of red dye. I think it's called potassium cyanocyanide, and the reaction it makes is when it comes into contact with an acid and an iron to create Prussian blue, which is a completely different colour in itself. It doesn't completely alter the stamp, whatever the chemical reaction is, just enough though to stain the back of the paper. And again, another perforated Tiffany blue. There's just a watermark difference between the ones that I haven't got and that one, and that one's a different plate. Moving on, this is white paper and some more colour variations. Oh yes, and there's a different dye that was used to print the stamps. I think one was much clearer than the other, and you've really got to take a magnifying glass to check it out. On die 1, the Queen has a straight lip, and on die 2 she's got quite a curved lip. And moving on, the stamps start to get letters in all 4 corners. In those varieties, there's just 2 letters at the bottom of each stamp. These are distinguished by the lines in between 2p and postage. I don't know if you can see, but that one's thicker than those 2. These are the halfpenny stamps, also called the Bantam, and they were used for postcards and newspapers. You could roll a newspaper up and just add a stamp to it and send it off in the post. These were printed quite a bit later than the other stamps. The halfpenny post wasn't introduced till 1870, and then there's this great boom in people sending cards to each other. This is a 1.5 penny or 3 halfpennies. There's a colour variation missing here, and this is an error that happened in the printing works. I don't think I'll be able to afford that. Moving on, these are all the plate numbers of the penny red. A lot of them are just filling spaces, really. They're in very, very bad condition. But ideally, I'd like one of each. This aren't 71, and go on all the way to plate 225. the average price for these is about £1 or £2, depending on the condition. Though you can pay up to £30 or £40 for even quite a used stamp. And I've made myself a bingo sheet here. So once I fill a line of penny reds, I should give myself a treat, I think. And moving on, I don't know if you saw my other video about fake stamps, but these are fake. I'm not sure how they've been printed. It looks like they've been printed on a Xerox machine, a colour photocopier, but they're really quite nice, and they're filling in a space here. These were an embossed collection of stamps, and with all 4 corners complete. They're really quite expensive, in the hundreds of pounds. You can get them maybe for £20 or £30, cut very close to the edge, but I don't really see the point. So I got these. I think they're £1 each, off a seller on eBay, and it adds some colour to the page. Moving on, these were some of the price variations, and different colours. The penny stamps were only in red, and the halfpenny was in a kind of rosy red, and these add a bit of colour to the collection again. And some more. The previous set didn't have any numbers in the corners of the stamps. Sorry, letters. But the next edition started incorporating them. I think it was a security device. Not entirely sure. But there was a sheet of 240 stamps, and you'd start from AA right down to the combinations of the alphabet. There's quite a lot missing there. Again, these have got letters in the corner. They're a bit bigger. And another set, but with a different watermark this time. It's called a spray of roses. Right. Here's some high value ones. And no, I can't help myself, can I? Here's another fake stamp by a guy called Michael Aldred. They're really, really quite nice. They're not photocopied. I'm not sure which kind of technique that he uses, but they are much nicer. and I believe he makes his own hand stamp. But I don't think anybody would would be convinced that it was real. It's only there to add a little bit of colour. And again, another set. These are all very interesting because they all look such alike, but they've all got different watermarks. They've got anchors. That's got an orb. Spray of roses again. They have a large garter, and those have the imperial crown. And this is the newer halfpenny stamp that replaced the very small bantam stamp. There's another colour variation of that, which I haven't got. They're not very expensive either, and here is the penny stamp that was used till the end of Queen Victoria's reign in 1901. So it had a good run. I beg your pardon. It was used for a year. I'll show you the stamp that was used for the rest of the reign in a moment. I beg your pardon. So yes, these are the penny violet stamps that were used to the end of Queen Victoria's reign. Now there's two versions of those. There's some with 14 dots in the corner, and some with 16. And they're just some colour variations that are missing. And again, some high value stamps. That's the only one that I've got. But I think they're not terribly expensive on the white paper. The ones on the blue paper are much rarer. But I think you can pick these up for £10 or £15. And these are quite a bit dearer, the blue ones, and the £1 stamps again dearer. So these were the next edition of stamps, and there's another halfpenny, this time in slate blue. They're all in lilacs and greens, and they were very universally disliked at the time. They're a bit washy, really. And so in 1887, the same year as the Jubilee, these were introduced. This marked 50 years since coronation of Queen Victoria. I've got quite a good selection here. There are colour variations, and some of them are quite expensive. But without the colour variations, I beg your pardon, I've got the full set here. These are my Edward VII stamps. Collecting Edward VII stamps are much harder than I thought it was going to be. There's not only colour variations with Edward VII, but also different printers. The earlier ones were printed by De La Rue on ordinary paper, and I've got quite a good selection, really, of those. One of each, anyway. And the next set, also by De La Rue, were printed on a chalk paper. I don't know if this camera is good enough to see, but on chalk paper the definition tends to be much clearer. But also the problem with chalk stamps is that if they come into contact with water for any length of time, I think that some of the colours can run. So I think that might be the problem there, but I'm not exactly sure. This is another set, this time printed by Harrison's and Sons in 1911. The halfpenny up to 4p, with a 14 gauge perforation, and halfpence, 4p again, with a 15 by 14 perforation. I don't think that I'm going to even go near these. I have no idea how you distinguish those from the other stamps. Though I'm told that the next section, the very last stamps printed for Edward VII by Somerset House, they're easier to obtain. Again, some of them are quite expensive. So I'm not sure. If anybody has any advice on the Somerset House and some of the other the Harrison stamps, then please let me know. So they were Edward VII. Move on to the George V, and these set of stamps called the Downy Heads. There was 2 dies used again, and the die B, down here on the scales of that fish, they're less clear than on die A. I haven't got any of the die A stamps, although I don't think they're expensive. I just haven't come across them in the collections that I started off with. So yes, the 2 dies and 2 types. On oh heck, on these ones, oh heck, if I can get it to focus. I can't even get it to focus. You really need a magnifying glass, I think, to tell die A from die B on the 1 penny stamps. It's down at the side of revenue, on the ribbon. But yes, so I'm missing some and some colour variations, and these are booklet stamps. I've got these ones upside down because the watermark is upside down on the stamps. You find on a lot of the booklet stamps that the watermark is upside down. With the George V ones, it can go either way, but certainly with Edward VIII and George VI, they tend to be upside down. And moving on, these are the Type 2 downy heads. Oh heck! On these, the king's hair has a bit more definition to it, whereas on the Type 1, his hair looked like a black blob. And on the penny stamps, the lion has a little bit more definition and muscle to it, whereas on the Type 1 stamps, the lions are quite white. Yes, so that's those. These are the next issue of stamps, from 1912, and they were printed all the way up to 1922, and My oh my, there's such colour variations, and this light, I'm afraid, doesn't really do it any service, but you can, even with my eyes, I can make out the different variations of colour, though some are harder than others. Here is, I think it must have been a test stamp in a deep Prussian blue, and that one is very, very expensive. Again, the colour variations, some of them quite expensive. This is the same as this stamp here, I think, but it's got a different perforation. But other than the perforation, the two stamps are identical. And I'm not sure what that stamp is. Biester Brown. That's olive brown. That's Biester Brown, apparently. Yes, right. And there's also these two variations with another watermark. These are a simple cipher. These are a multiple cipher. These stamps are the seahorses. There's a lot of colour variations and a lot of printers. I think I'm just going to try and keep it simple with those three there. Some of them are very, very expensive, and out of my league, I'd say. Right, in 1924, a sigh of relief. There's a very simple set of definitives there, and only one colour variation, reddish purple and a purple, and that is printed on a chalk face surface as well. With the definition, if you can see it, if we can focus, tends to be much better. As compared to the ordinary paper, where I can't see any difference actually, but supposedly anyway. Right, and moving on, these are commemoratives for the British Empire exhibition, 1924 and 1925, and these are for the Postal Union Congress of 1929. This is a facsimile that was issued by the British Royal Mail. And that's the last of my fake stamps, I can assure you. There's some watermark variations of the Postal Congress stamps. They're sideways, they're inverted. If you happen to have the blue one, it's worth about £750 used, so hang on to it. There's some more watermark variations there, and they're for Edward VIII. We'll come to those shortly. These were the last definitive set, and slightly different printing method, and the king's head is on a solid background. Some more seahorses, and these have a slightly different background to them. And finally, to celebrate the King's Jubilee, 25 years on the throne, these were issued. Though there is another 2.5p stamp, and that's, I think, in Prussian blue. There was only one sheet ever sold, and if you have that, I think they're worth £10,000. So get it to auction if you can find it. These are the 4 stamps issued for King Edward VIII. He came to the throne after his father's death, and abdicated before he was crowned the king. And a lot of people bought the stamps. That the 2.5p used is worth more than the mint stamp. And we come to King George VI, his coronation, his definitives, some watermark variations, some high value stamps, a commemorative for 100 years of the first penny postage, and some colour variations. They were during the war, and they were during the post-war austerity. Watermark variations, and definitives. These were actually issued by the state of Jersey, but I believe that you could buy them in main post offices in England, and that's the wedding anniversary. This is peace, Olympic Games, Postal Union, Festival of Britain, and the high value Festival of Britain stamps. And moving on to Queen Elizabeth. These are the first definitive set with a Tudor crown. There's some watermark variations. It's coronation stamps. These are the castle stamps. Again, these are by different printers. And telling them apart is all in the detail. The second set of definitives, these are with the St. Edward's crown, and again watermark variations. The Parliamentary Conference and the Jamboree stamps and Commonwealth Games. You'll find that the King George VI and the Queen Elizabeth II commemorative stamps are quite inexpensive, really. Another definitive set, and this lasted to the matching set in 1965, and these had a multiple crowns. Watermark variations, chalk paper, and these are the graphite stamps. These have a line on the back that was going to be, it was a trial. For automated sorting. That's watermark variations. More castles. And now it comes to the phosphor stamps. Some phosphor stamps, like this one, were really, really heavily done, and obliterate the sides of the stamp, and it also has graphite lines on the back. But other phosphor bands are incredibly difficult to see. I leave it to dealers, really. But I don't know if we can see in this light, but you might be able to make out the phosphor band there, and there. So that one's quite easy to see in that block, but otherwise you can get a short wave ultraviolet light, not the type of black light that you get from China, but a more intense ultraviolet light, and you can see much better with that. These are watermark variations, and and more of the commemoratives. Some really pretty ones there. And in 1962, they started printing both sets of stamps with ordinary and with phosphor lines. So some of the ones with phosphor lines on, they can be quite expensive. Not dead dear, but more expensive than on the ordinary paper. Phosphor for ordinary. These Battle of Britain. It's 4-penny stamps in like a miniature sheet. And just tilt that a little bit. Post Office Tower. Robert Burns. The World Cup in 1966 and the World Cup winner stamp, also of 1966. And the phosphor issues, British birds, phosphor, the Battle of Hastings, 900 years, and British wildflowers. And these are the first pre-decimal matching stamps, and there's a very pretty colour variation there. There's the higher value ones. From 1967 onwards, I think all of the stamps were issued with phosphorus lines on. There was the trial had been a great success, and there was no ordinary stamps printed after that time. These are the last of the castle set. Bridges, anniversaries, Christmas stamps. I think these were the very first Christmas stamps issued. British boats, Concord, cathedrals, the investiture of the Prince of Wales, who's now King Charles III, and Christmas stamps, anniversaries, the Philadelphia 1970 postal exhibition, and the Christmas stamps, and also the regional stamps that were issued, and the postage dues. And that's it. That's a collection. Yes, there's a long way to go yet. I tried to work out what it would cost me if I bought all the stamps that I'm missing. Yes, it even on conservative used estimates, without any of those Edward VII stamps, would probably cost me about £30,000. So I've taken a lot of your time, if you've bared with me, and thank you for watching. Stamp collecting, a great hobby. It's very rewarding, and yes, it really is something that I enjoy, and I've got a lot to keep me busy. Thank you very much. Bye for now. Bye bye.